Hello everyone and welcome to ACAD-06, where we will discuss the format and contents of a filed flight plan. So looking at the contents of such a flight plan, we first have the aircraft identification, which is typically going to be the call sign that is used over the radio. Well, is always going to be the call sign that is used over the radio. Then we have the flight rules the aircraft will be flying under, which is either going to be VFR or IFR, and this is denoted by the single letter V or I for VFR and IFR respectively. Then we have the number and type of the aircraft and the equipment carried by that aircraft. So in this example, we have two F-18s. Then the departure aerodrome and the departure time, which is always going to be in Zulu. Then we have the cruising speed, cruising level, and the aircraft's intended route. And finally, the destination aerodrome and the estimated flight time, and potentially an alternate aerodrome. We can then have any other information regarding the flight, and then any kind of important supplementary information. So this could include fuel endurance, the number of people on board, the color of the aircraft, and this can all assist any search and rescue operations that may be, hopefully not, but may be required. So looking at the number and type of aircraft in a bit more detail. The aircraft type is always displayed as an ICAO type code, and some common ones are shown here in the slides. And then if a flight has multiple aircraft types in formation, they use the convention that's on the right there. So in that example, we have a flight of one Harrier and two A-10s. Then looking at the cruising speed, cruising level, and their intended routing. For the cruise speed is indicated by true airspeed, and it's preceded by the letter N if it's stated in knots, or K if it's stated in kilometers per hour. And these are always as 4 digits. Then we have the cruising level, which is preceded by the letter A if it's in altitude as hundreds of feet. So in this case, A050 indicates 5,000 feet, or F if it's in the flight levels. In this case, flight level 150. For a VFR routing, this tends to be a series of visual reference points, but can generally just be kind of plain text, plain English used to describe the routing of the aircraft. For an IFR flight, this does tend to be a bit more structured, where we'll quite often have a series of IFR waypoints and airways. So in this example, we have ACAD Bravo 491 to ATSA, where the aircraft will fly to ACAD, and then once passing ACAD, it will follow the Bravo 491 airway all the way to ATSA. Then sometimes instead of an airway, you will have the letters Delta Charlie Tango, which means that the aircraft will be going direct to the waypoint and not following any airway. The routing will typically always start and end with a waypoint name, unless it starts and ends with a SID or star. SID will stand for Standard Instrument Departure. We name a SID using the final waypoint or navaid on the departure. Then we have a number and a letter, typically. So at ANAPA, one of the SIDs is the Rudel 1 Charlie. The number can typically be anything, normally single digit, and the letter will typically define the specific routing. The number and letter are typically going to be different for each runway. The SIDs, as I said earlier, may be filed before the first waypoint included in the routing, and this must be checked to ensure that the correct active runway is being used, or for any other restrictions in that routing. We then have stars, or standard terminal arrival routes, which very similarly is named using the initial navaid or waypoint's name, and then a number and a letter. And for another ANAPA example, we have the NALAD 1 Foxtrot. The star can also be filed after the final waypoint in the flight plan, but this may and quite often will be changed by an area or terminal controller, i.e. a radar controller, once the aircraft is en route. So here we have a full example flight plan. The first section of this, the FPL, indicates that this is a flight plan. Then we have the Hornet 1, which is the aircraft's call sign. We then have the letters IM. The I here indicates they will be IFR, and the M indicates that this is a military flight. Then on the second line here, we have the aircraft type and number. So in this case, it is a single F-18. We then have the wake turbulence category, which you do not need to worry about at this stage, followed by the capabilities and equipment carried by the aircraft, which similarly you do not need to worry about at this stage. We then have the departure aerodrome and departure time. In this case, they will be departing ANAPA at 11:20 Zulu. Following this, we have the speed, in this case 250 knots, and the cruise level at flight level 90. This is followed by the route, so in this case they will be routing to Rudel and then direct to Balag. This is then followed by the arrival aerodrome and the time en route. So in this case they will be arriving at Krasnodar-Pashkovsky after 24 minutes of flight, estimated obviously, and their alternate here is Krasnodar Center. Then we have any supplementary information, so in this case they have indicated they have one person on board. Now let's have a quick look at validating flight plans. So apart from kind of ensuring everything is within the bounds that we spoke about earlier, for example ensuring that the routes are reasonable, the standard instrument departures are correct, all the waypoints are on the airways that they've said, and ensuring that the cruise levels follow any restrictions that are along the route. Then we also have some level restrictions, which change when they're going eastbound or westbound, just to make sure that aircraft going in opposite directions have a lower chance of hitting each other. So at or below flight level 290, all the westbound flights are on even flight levels. For example, flight level 280, flight level 260, etc. And all the eastbound flights are on odd flight levels. For example, flight level 290 or flight level 270. Then above flight level 290, the westbound flights go on levels that are even but not a multiple of 4. For example, flight level 300, flight level 340, etc. And aircraft going eastbound are on flight levels which are a multiple of 4. For example, flight level 320, flight level 360. And when you are deciding on a cruise level for an aircraft, we also want to take into account the agreed levels between different sectors and the restrictions imposed by any standard instrument departures or arrivals. So to summarize this, we had a look at how we read flight plans and the contents of such a flight plan. For example, the call sign, flight rules, the number and type of aircraft, the departure aerodrome and departure time, their routing, and then their arrival aerodrome and time en route. We also had a cursory look at SIDS and STARS. And then finally we looked at validating a flight plan, and this involves validating the route, making sure all the SIDS and STARS are correct, making sure the route is in any way reasonable, and also validating the cruising level.